God speaks through your restless. God speaks through your restless heart in ways you never expected. There is a hunger that no feast of this earth can satisfy. It stirs before the first light of dawn, before the noise of the world has time to drown it. It follows you through every triumph and lingers behind every loss. You feel it in the quiet hours when no distraction can keep it at bay. St. Augustine named it centuries ago when he confessed, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." It is the ache of eternity echoing through time, a silent summons from the infinite to the finite, a whisper that refuses to be silenced. You can try to bury it under ambition, decorate it with pleasure, cover it with noise, but the longing remains. An unquenchable thirst woven into the very fabric of your soul. It is the sound of God speaking, not in thunder, but in the restlessness of your own heart. Perhaps you have felt it after a victory that left you strangely empty, or in a relationship that promised everything yet left you lonely. You climb the ladder the world has built, only to discover it leans against the wrong wall. You hold the prize in your hands and find it tastes of dust. You win the applause of the crowd and discover that silence follows you home. This is not failure. This is the first mercy of God, the holy discontent that keeps you from mistaking the shadow for the substance. It is the invitation to awaken, to listen, to turn toward the flame that burns behind the world of appearances. It is the eternal calling you to the source from which you came. Every soul begins as a seeker, even those who swear they are not searching. Denial itself is a kind of longing, a protest too loud to be believed. The poet Dante called it a dark wood, that bewildering place where we awaken to find ourselves lost, the old paths exhausted, the familiar lights gone dim. Perhaps you know that forest, the crowded room that leaves you empty, the career that glittered but could not quiet the ache, the comforts that soothe the body but starve the spirit. It is here, in this sacred bewilderment, that the soul begins to yearn not for more possessions or brighter pleasures, but for truth. Not the kind of truth that can be memorized or traded like coin, but the truth that burns, that strips away illusion, that asks for nothing less than everything. But truth does not shout. It waits. It hides in the very places we resist, in the stillness after disappointment, in the humility of not knowing, in the surrender of a heart too tired to pretend. The mystics call this the dark night of the soul. It is not a punishment, but a passage. It is the stripping away of everything that is not real, the quiet dismantling of the self you thought you had to be, so that the soul might remember what cannot be lost. Teresa of Avila walked through this night and found within herself a mansion more spacious than the sky, a dwelling place of God hidden in the center of her being. Pascal felt it as the infinite abyss that only the infinite can fill. Meister Eckhart called it the breakthrough. The moment when the soul discovers that letting go is the beginning of everything. In this night, the heart is broken open. The decorations of the ego are stripped away. The masks, the titles, the stories we tell ourselves to feel important. You learn that your achievements cannot protect you, your cleverness cannot save you, and your plans cannot command the tides. Control, which once felt like safety, begins to feel like a fragile throne. And here, in the quiet center of surrender, something miraculous begins to happen. You discover that reality does not collapse when you release your grip, it opens. The river of life carries you not toward ruin, but toward the source from which every current flows. The wisdom you once tried to capture with words begins to speak in the silent alignment of events, in the sudden knowing that arrives without reason. Kierkegaard called faith a leap, not a reckless plunge into chaos, but a surrender to the God who is always greater than your understanding. To surrender is not to vanish. It is to awaken. It is to discover that the self you defended so fiercely was only a mask, a collection of names and roles as fleeting as clouds across the sky. From childhood, we collect these masks: the successful one, the clever one, the beautiful one, the misunderstood one. They feel solid, but they are only costumes in the theater of time. They bind us to praise and fear, to competition and despair. When the mask falls, you do not disappear. You finally appear. You realize you're not the roles you perform, not the opinions others project onto you, not even the story you tell yourself in secret. You are the witness, the breath, the unnameable presence in which every name arises and fades. Eckhart said, "The soul must become empty of self to be full of God." This emptiness is not annihilation, it is spaciousness, the clearing of the inner room. The heart that has learned to let go begins to taste a freedom that cannot be manufactured, a freedom that does not depend on circumstances, a freedom that remains even when the winds of fortune turn cold. It is the quiet liberation of a soul no longer enslaved to outcomes, a soul that moves through the world with open hands and unguarded eyes. This is the freedom of the lilies of the field, clothed in a beauty they do not toil to create, and of the birds of the air, who neither sow nor reap, yet are fed by a care deeper than calculation. The restless heart discovers that its true security was never in its own power, but in the hidden fidelity of the one who holds all things together. In this freedom, silence becomes a teacher, not the heavy silence of emptiness, but the luminous silence that hums with presence. The world, once loud with demands, begins to reveal a deeper music. The rustling of leaves becomes a psalm, the rhythm of the ocean a litany, the stillness between heartbeats a sanctuary where the eternal speaks without words. The cloud of unknowing, that anonymous medieval guide to prayer, counseled seekers to pierce the darkness not with thought but with love. For love alone can cross the unbridgeable distance between the finite and the infinite. In this silence, you begin to realize that prayer is not first a speech, but a listening, not an argument, but a surrender into communion. Here, humility becomes strength. The ego fears humility, imagining it as humiliation, as loss of dignity. But the saints knew it as the door to glory. To be humble is to stand in the truth of your own contingency, to know that you are not the source of your own existence, and to rejoice in the gift of being rather than the illusion of self-creation. Teresa of Avila once said that humility is walking in truth. It is the courage to live unmasked, to admit your dependence, to let God be God and yourself be loved. This humility is not weakness. It is the soil in which divine love takes root and grows into unshakable joy. And love, always love, is the destination toward which every longing bends. Not the sentimental love of fleeting emotions, but the love that Dante saw as the power that moves the sun and the other stars. This love is not a possession to be earned. It is the very being of God poured out in ceaseless generosity. To awaken to this love is to awaken to reality itself. It is to see every face as a mirror of the eternal, every moment as a sacrament of presence, every sorrow as a doorway to a deeper mercy. Pascal called it the fire of the heart, the hidden flame that once encountered can never be forgotten. As this flame burns, gratitude becomes the natural language of the soul. Gratitude for the breath you did not create, for the sun that rises without your command, for the mysterious weave of joys and sorrows that has shaped the person you're becoming. Gratitude does not deny pain, it transfigures it. It sees even the wounds as openings through which grace enters. It knows that every loss that stripped you bare was also clearing the way for a love more enduring than all you tried to hold. In gratitude, the restless heart learns to dance, even in the dark. And then comes the ascent, not an escape from earth, but a rising within it. The mystics speak of this ascent in many tongues. Augustine's upward flight of the heart, Eckhart's breakthrough, Dante's climb through the spheres of paradise. But all point to the same mystery. The soul awakened to God does not flee the world. It finds God shining within the world. Every mountain becomes a Sinai, every meal a Eucharist, every stranger a messenger of the divine. The ordinary is flooded with the extraordinary until there is no longer a border between sacred and secular, only the seamless radiance of being. This is not the end of desire. It is the transfiguration of desire. The restless heart does not become numb. It becomes infinite. Its hunger is no longer for passing pleasures, but for the inexhaustible beauty of God. Its thirst is no longer for control, but for communion. It longs as Augustine longed, to rest in the one who alone can satisfy, and yet forever draws the soul deeper into mystery. The more you drink, the more you thirst. But the thirst itself becomes joy, because it is the sign that you are alive with the life of God. To live in this way is to walk a path both ancient and ever new. It is to join the silent procession of saints and poets, pilgrims and prophets, whose restless hearts became conduits of eternal love. It is to discover that God has been speaking through your longings from the beginning, not in flashes of spectacle, but in the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat, in the quiet desire that no success could silence. Every restless night, every unanswered question, every tear shed in hidden prayer was already the voice of the Eternal calling you home. And now the call is before you again, not as a command, but as an invitation, not as a riddle to solve, but as a mystery to enter. You do not need to climb the highest mountain or cross a distant sea. The threshold is as near as your next breath. Close your eyes. Listen, the silence is not empty. It is full. Full of the love that called the galaxies into being. Full of the presence that holds your life even now. This is how God speaks through your restless heart, not by removing the ache, but by deepening it until you recognize it as the very pulse of divine love drawing you back to the source. Surrender to that love. Trust the ache. Let the hunger guide you home. The path of surrender does not end in passivity. It opens into a life more vibrant than the one driven by striving. For when you release the desperate need to prove yourself, you become available to the quiet guidance of grace. Your choices are no longer frantic attempts to secure meaning. They become responses to a meaning that is already given. Actions flow not from fear, but from love. You still work, you still dream, you still build and create, but each gesture carries the fragrance of freedom because it is no longer chained to the outcome. This is what Eckhart meant when he said, the soul must be empty of self to be full of God. Empty, yes, but only as a chalice is empty, so that it may be filled with living wine. As this freedom deepens, you begin to see the hidden order beneath the apparent chaos of life. Coincidences once dismissed as chance reveal themselves as subtle alignments, quiet confirmations that you're being led by a wisdom beyond calculation. The sudden meeting that changes everything. The words spoken at the precise moment you needed it. The door that closes only to reveal a better path. Each becomes a sacrament of guidance. You understand, with Kierkegaard, that faith is not certainty, but trust. A leap into the arms of a God who is always greater than your plans. And in that trust, you find a serenity the world cannot give. But serenity does not mean the absence of struggle. the dark night still comes. Even the saints walk through deserts where God seemed silent, where prayer tasted of dust and hope flickered like a dying flame. Yet they discovered that the night is not a void, but a womb. In the hidden darkness, the soul is being stretched to receive more light. The very silence that feels like abandonment is often the deepest form of presence, a love too vast to fit into words. Augustine called it the wound of love, the holy restlessness that keeps the soul moving toward its true home. When you accept this restlessness as a gift rather than a curse, it transforms from anxiety into longing, from emptiness into spaciousness. You no longer rush to fill the ache with noise or pleasure. You allow it to widen you, to hollow out the caverns of your heart so that the infinite may dwell there. This is the paradox of the spiritual life. The more you let go, the more you receive. The more you empty, the more you overflow. To die to the false is to awaken to the real. To relinquish control is to discover the hands that have been holding you all along. Here, gratitude becomes more than a feeling. It becomes a way of seeing. You begin to thank not only for what pleases you, but for what breaks you open. You bless the unanswered prayers, the detours, the losses, because you see how they cleared the path for a deeper joy. You learn to trust that even the smallest detail of your life is being woven into a pattern of love. And this trust does not dull your senses, it sharpens them. Every face becomes luminous, every breath a miracle, every passing moment a chance to behold eternity clothed in time. Eventually, the boundaries you once defended begin to dissolve. The division between sacred and secular, between prayer and action, between God and world, fades into a single radiant presence. You find yourself praying while you work, worshiping while you walk, loving God in the very act of loving others. The marketplace becomes a monastery, the kitchen a chapel, the beating of your own heart a hymn of praise. This is the union the mystics sought, not an escape from earth, but a transfiguration of it, until heaven and earth are revealed as two sides of the same infinite love. And still, the journey continues, for love has no end. It draws you deeper, ever deeper, into mystery. Each revelation becomes a threshold to a greater unveiling. Each taste of God awakens a new hunger, not of deprivation, but of delight. The restless heart never stops longing, because its true object is infinite. And in that endless longing is endless joy, for to desire the infinite is already to possess it, just as to thirst for the spring is already to feel the freshness of its waters. So listen once more to the quiet ache within you. Do not rush to silence it or to satisfy it with lesser things. Let it speak, let it guide you. It is the voice of the eternal calling you beyond the small story of your own making, into the vast story of God. This is how God speaks through your restless heart, through hunger that will not be filled, through questions that refuse easy answers, through a love that keeps widening until it becomes the very air you breathe. Here is the final invitation. Loosen your grip on control. Lay down the masks of identity. Release the craving for particular outcomes. Step into the vastness that has been calling you since the beginning. The treasure you seek is not hidden. It waits in the open hands of surrender. To gain all things, let go. To be full, be empty. To live, die to the false. And in that dying, awaken to the boundless truth that has been whispering through every breath. You are held, you are loved, and nothing real can ever be lost. Stay with this awareness a moment longer. Feel the pulse of your own breathing. Notice how even now, without effort, life sustains you. The heart beats, the lungs draw air, the earth spins beneath you, and none of it asks for your permission. This quiet rhythm is the first language of God, the word spoken before all words. It tells you that existence itself is a gift, that before you can do or achieve anything, you are already loved into being. Augustine heard this in the silence and cried, "Late have I loved you, beauty ever ancient, ever new." He discovered that the one he sought was nearer than his own breath, more intimate than his own soul, waiting not in some distant realm, but in the hidden chamber of the heart. Here lies the mystery that shatters all striving. You do not need to climb to heaven to find God, for heaven bends down to you. The eternal has already crossed the infinite distance and clothed itself in the fabric of your ordinary life. The restless heart is not a punishment. It is the homing signal of grace. Every desire, even when misdirected, is a distorted echo of the one desire to return to the source. Even your distractions, your ambitions, your secret fears, they are the soul's way of groping for a love that cannot be named. When you finally stop running, you realize you were never apart. The journey was always an awakening to what already is. But awakening is not the end. It is the beginning of a deeper life. To know that you are loved is to be summoned to love. The heart that rests in God becomes a conduit of mercy, a lamp in dark places, a quiet revolution in a world hungry for meaning. The mystics teach that contemplation and action are not opposites, but two movements of the same love. The one who listens deeply becomes the one who serves freely. To kneel before the infinite is to rise for the suffering neighbor, and every act of compassion, however small, becomes a continuation of the divine heartbeat. This is how God speaks, through the restlessness that drives you beyond yourself, and through the peace that follows when you surrender. Through the cry for justice and the whisper of forgiveness, through the laughter of a child, the stillness of a dawn, the ache of a farewell, the joy of a return. Through scripture and through silence, through beauty and through brokenness. There is no corner of existence where the voice of the eternal does not resound, if only you will listen. So listen, not with the ears of argument, but with the ears of wonder. Let the questions remain open like windows through which the wind of the Spirit can move. Do not fear the unknown. It is the birthplace of revelation. Do not despise the ordinary. It is the altar where the infinite hides in plain sight. Each breath, each step, each encounter is a fresh invitation to communion. Even now, as these words reach you, something stirs, an almost imperceptible movement of grace, a gentle summons to remember who you are and whose you are. Let your heart rest in this truth. You were made for union, not separation, for wonder, not despair, for eternity, not oblivion. The longing you feel is the proof of your belonging. The ache itself is holy. It is the touch of God awakening you from the dream of self-sufficiency, calling you back to the eternal embrace from which you came and to which you will return. And so, beloved listener, walk gently through this world. Carry the silence within you like a hidden flame. Love without counting the cost. Seek the face of the infinite in every stranger, every sorrow, every joy. Let the restless heart lead you not to more striving, but to deeper surrender, until surrender itself becomes delight. For in that surrender, you will find the paradox that has animated every mystic, every saint, every lover of truth. When you lose yourself, you find the self that cannot be lost. When you let go of all things, you gain all things. When you finally cease to grasp, you discover you are already held. Listen again to the quiet, to the pulse of being, to the God who speaks through the restlessness of your own heart, in ways you never expected and in love beyond all telling.